grandson was 6 years old, small enough that I could carry him on one shoulder, and he always smelled like grass and peanut butter. That's the detail I keep coming back to. Not the blood. Not the dark. The grass and peanut butter. His name is Felix. I need you to remember that. I retired early, 31 years with the county water department, and my knees gave out before my mind did. My wife Darlene used to say I was built like a truck but maintained like a bicycle. She passed 8 years ago, pancreatic cancer, fast and merciless, and after that I rattled around our house in Cloverdale like a marble in a shoebox. My son Aaron lived 40 minutes away with his wife Renata. When Felix was born, Aaron called me from the hospital at 2 in the morning, and I could hear him crying. Not sad crying. The other kind. I drove there in my pajamas. For the first 4 years, I saw Felix every weekend. Saturdays mostly. I'd pick him up. We'd go to the hardware store because he loved the paint chip samples. He'd collect them, organize them by color, make little books. 6-year-old kid, deeply invested in the difference between antique ivory and warm linen. Then Aaron got promoted, regional logistics manager, which sounds important and mostly means he's never home. Renata started teaching evening yoga classes 3 nights a week. Their schedules stopped matching up. Mine and Felix's Saturdays got shorter, then irregular, then it was a month between visits, then 2. I didn't push. I should have pushed. It was a Wednesday in October when Aaron called and asked if I could take Felix for a long weekend. He had a conference in Denver, Renata had a retreat in Sedona, their regular babysitter had mono. Of course, I said. Before he finished the sentence, I drove over Thursday evening to pick Felix up. Renata met me at the door. She looked tired in a way I recognized, not from work, but from something underneath work. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. He's been a handful lately, she said. Felix came down the stairs with his backpack on backwards and a paint chip tucked in his shirt pocket like a pocket square. Navajo white. I laughed. He grinned. Renata stood in the doorway and watched us back out of the driveway, and she had this look on her face I didn't understand at the time. I told myself it was just stress. Marriage stress. Job stress. The kind of thing that passes. I was wrong about that. I've been wrong about a lot of things. The weekend was easy and good in the way that only a weekend with a 6-year-old can be. We built a birdhouse from a kit I'd had in my garage for 3 years. We ate cereal for dinner because he asked and I said yes, and that's what grandfathers are for. Saturday morning, he woke me up at 5:30 to tell me the sky was doing something interesting, and we sat on the porch in our coats and watched it get light. He asked me why the clouds moved. I told him the wind pushed them. He thought about this. What pushes the wind? I didn't have an answer for that. Still don't. Sunday afternoon, I drove him home. Aaron was already back from Denver, standing in the kitchen making sandwiches. He looked better than he had in a while. Rested, present, we ate lunch together, the 3 of us plus Renata, and it felt almost like things were fine. I drove home thinking, this is enough, this is a good life. That was October. By December, I could tell something was wrong. It wasn't any one thing. It was a collection of small things that I kept explaining away, the way you do when you don't want to see what you're seeing. Aaron stopped answering my calls as quickly. When he did answer, he sounded distant, like he was having 2 conversations at once. He stopped mentioning Felix in passing. Before, he'd always had some small story. Felix said this, Felix did that. That stopped. I called one Saturday to arrange a visit, and Renata answered and said Felix wasn't feeling well. I called the next Saturday and she said they had plans. The 3rd Saturday, Aaron answered and said things were just really busy right now, maybe after the holidays. I said okay, I let 3 more weeks pass. Then I drove over unannounced. I'm not proud of it. You don't show up unannounced at your adult son's house? I know that, but I woke up that Sunday morning with this feeling in my chest, low and heavy, like something had shifted. I tried to ignore it. Made coffee. Sat in my chair. Read the same paragraph 4 times. I got in the car. It was a 40-minute drive and I spent it telling myself I was overreacting. By the time I pulled onto their street, I'd half convinced myself I'd knock, have an awkward cup of coffee, and feel foolish. Aaron's car was in the driveway. Renata's was gone. I knocked. He took a long time to answer. When he did, he looked, I want to say haggard, but it was more specific than that. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in weeks and had made peace with it. Dad, not a greeting. More like a fact he was registering. I was in the neighborhood, I said. which we both knew was not true. He let me in. The house was clean, maybe too clean. That particular kind of spotless that means someone has been cleaning obsessively. The kitchen smelled like bleach and coffee. "Where's Felix?" I asked. "He's upstairs. He's been sick." "Sick how?" "Just a cold. He's resting." I started toward the stairs. Aaron stepped in front of me. Not aggressively. He shifted, blocked, the way you do without quite meaning to. "I don't want to wake him," he said. I looked at my son for a long moment. He didn't look back at me. "Aaron," I said, "what's happening?" "Nothing, Dad. Everything's fine. We're just going through some stuff, Renata and me. We'll figure it out." I wanted to believe him. I went home and tried to believe him. 6 days later, I got a call from Felix's school. The secretary, a woman named Helen, I'll remember her name until I die, told me that Felix had missed 9 days in the past 3 weeks, and that when he did come in, he'd been withdrawn, not engaging with other kids, not eating his lunch. She said his teacher was concerned. She was calling because I was listed as an emergency contact. I asked if she'd called Aaron and Renata. She said she'd called Renata twice. Both times Renata said he was fine and would be back soon. I hung up and sat very still for a minute. Then I called Aaron. It went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I called Renata. She answered on the third ring and her voice was flat and careful, the way voices get when someone has rehearsed being calm. She said Felix had some anxiety issues they were working through. She said the school was overreacting. She said everything was being handled. I said I'd like to come see him. She said this weekend, maybe, she'd check the schedule. The schedule. My grandson is 6 years old and she's going to check the schedule. I drove over the next morning. 6:45 a.m. Aaron's car was gone. He left for work early. I knew that. Renata's car was in the driveway. I knocked for 2 minutes before she answered. She was in yoga clothes, hair up. Not a trace of the person I talked to on the phone. She smiled. She was warm. She said I should have called ahead. "I'd like to see Felix," I said. "He's still sleeping." "I'll wait." Something moved across her face, fast, like a fish underwater. "He's having a rough morning," she said. "It's really not a good time." "Renata." I kept my voice even. I'd been practicing it in the car. "I'm not leaving without seeing my grandson." She looked at me for a moment. Then she stepped back and let me in. The house felt different in the morning. Quieter than it should have been. I don't know how else to explain it. A 6-year-old boy should fill a house with sound, even when he's sleeping. Some ambient presence of him. This house felt empty. "I'll go get him," Renata said. She went upstairs. I stood in the hallway and looked at the family photos on the wall. Felix at 2, grinning with ice cream on his nose. Felix at 4, in his Little League uniform. Felix and Aaron at the beach. I heard Renata's footsteps above me, moving from room to room, back and forth. Then they stopped. I waited. She came back downstairs alone. Her face had rearranged itself into something careful. "He fell back asleep," she said. "He's exhausted. I really don't want to wake him. Can we do this Saturday?" And I stood there, in the house where my grandson lived, and thought about all the small things I'd explained away, the missed calls, and the clean kitchen, and the exhausted look on Aaron's face, and the school calling, and now this footsteps moving room to room because she didn't know where he was, or was buying time. "Where is he?" I said. "I told you, he's. I heard you walking around up there, back and forth. Where is he?" Her face did something I'd never seen it do. The warmth just left, like a light going off. What replaced it wasn't angry or scared. It was flat. "You need to go," she said. I went upstairs. She shouted at me to stop. I kept going. I hit the top of the stairs and started opening doors. Bathroom, empty. Linen closet. Guest room, empty. His room. His room. The bed was made. Not child-made, hospital corners. The paint-chipped books were stacked neatly on the shelf. His shoes were by the door in a perfect pair. Nobody had slept in that bed recently. Renata was behind me now. "Get out of this house. I will call the police. You have no right." I turned around. "Where is my grandson?" And I must have looked like something she hadn't expected, because she stopped talking. We stood there in that doorway for 3-4 seconds, and I heard it. From down the hall. Behind the door I thought was another closet. A sound. A small, rhythmic tapping. I moved toward it. Renata grabbed my arm and I shook her off. Not hard, but I shook her off, and I put my hand on the door handle. It was locked. One of those privacy locks, the kind with the small hole in the handle you can open from outside with a coin. I dug in my pocket, found a dime, unlocked it in 10 seconds. The door opened. It was a storage room. Boxes along one wall, an old lamp, Christmas decorations in plastic bins, and on the floor in the corner, wrapped in a moving blanket, was my grandson. He was alive. I have to say that first, even now, even though you can probably tell from the fact that I'm still here, telling this that he survived. I need to say it. He was alive. He blinked up at me in the light from the hallway, and his eyes were glassy and confused, and he said with this little cracked, dry voice, "Grandpa." I was on my knees before I knew I was moving. He wasn't tied. He wasn't hurt, not physically, not that I could see in that first moment. He was thin. He looked thin in a way that 6-year-olds don't look thin, like he'd missed a lot of meals. And he was cold. And he smelled not like grass and peanut butter, but like a place that hadn't had fresh air in too long. He put his arms around my neck, and I held him, and I said quietly into his hair, "I've got you. I've got you." Behind me, Renata said nothing. When I looked up, she was gone. I called 911 from that room with Felix in my lap. I held the phone with one hand and him with the other, and I told the dispatcher what I'd found and what address I was at. And I kept my voice steady through the whole thing, because I needed to, because Felix was watching my face to know if he should be scared, and I refused to let him be scared. The police came in 9 minutes. 2 officers, then 4, then an ambulance. Renata was in the kitchen when they came in. She'd had 9 minutes, and she'd spent them sitting at the kitchen table. Not running, not calling anyone. Just sitting there. I've thought about that a lot. Felix was dehydrated and underweight. At the hospital, they told me he lost nearly 4 pounds since his last checkup 6 weeks prior. He had a vitamin D deficiency consistent with limited sun exposure. He had bruising on his upper arms, old bruising, almost faded. The doctor who examined him was a quiet man who had clearly done this kind of examination before, and who explained each finding to me in a calm, measured way that I could tell cost him something to maintain. When he finished, he put his hand briefly on my shoulder and left the room. I sat next to Felix's hospital bed and watched him sleep, and I felt something I didn't have words for at the time. It wasn't just grief or anger, though it was both of those. It was the specific horror of realizing how long this had been happening while I drove home and ate cereal and watched the sky get light. Renata was arrested that morning. The full picture took weeks to piece together, and I'll tell you what I know. Not speculation. What I know. Renata had been struggling with something she'd never named out loud. Aaron told investigators, and later told me, that she'd become increasingly rigid about discipline over the past year. What started as strict rules, no sugar, limited screen time, strict bedtimes, had escalated in ways he'd minimized to himself. He'd seen the locked door and told himself it was her office space, her need for order. He'd seen Felix flinch once, and told himself kids flinch. He'd seen the bruising and believed her when she said Felix had fallen. I'm not going to excuse that. Aaron is my son, and I love him, and I will not excuse what he chose not to see. The isolation, investigators told me, had been escalating for about 3 months. Felix had been kept home from school under the guise of illness. The room had been a punishment that had become a pattern, that had become a routine. There was no grand scheme. That was somehow the worst part. It wasn't a monstrous plan. It was small decisions compounding in the dark until a 6-year-old boy was locked in a storage room with Christmas boxes and an old lamp. Among the boxes, investigators found a journal Renata had kept. I have not read it, and I don't intend to. I was told it contained rules she'd written out for Felix. Pages of them. Aaron did not face criminal charges. This is the fact I have complicated feelings about and will for the rest of my life. He cooperated fully. He was devastated in ways I believe were real. He is my son. He and I have not spoken at length since last spring, not because I've forbidden it, because neither of us has known what to say. We're working toward it. Our family therapist says that's progress. Renata was charged, convicted. She will not be out while Felix is still a child. That's the only part of the legal outcome I'll say out loud. Felix lives with me now. This was Aaron's decision. He came to me 6 weeks after everything happened, in my kitchen, and he said he didn't think he was the right person to parent Felix right now. That Felix needed stability and consistency, and someone Felix already felt safe with. He said, he asks for you. When he wakes up scared, he asks for you. I didn't know what to say. I said yes. We've been in therapy, Felix and I. A child psychologist in town named. Well, she told me I could call her Dr. M, so that's what I'll say. She sees Felix twice a week. I see another therapist on my own, which I resisted and now understand was necessary. Felix doesn't talk about the room much. He talks around it sometimes, in ways that let me know he's working through it without me having to ask. He told me once, very casually, while we were building another birdhouse, that he used to count the slats in the ceiling to fall asleep. I said, that sounds like something a very smart kid would do. He thought about it. There were 31. I said, I know something else that's 31. He looked at me. Years I worked for the county. 31. He found this very funny for reasons I don't entirely understand, but I'll take it. He's in first grade now. He has 2 friends, a boy named Arturo, who likes bugs, and a girl named Phoebe, who is apparently some kind of authority on horses. He brings home drawings. He eats. He's gained back the weight and then some, which the pediatrician said would happen, and I was glad to see with my own eyes. He still collects paint chips. His current favorite is called Harbor Fog, a kind of blue-gray that he says looks like the sky right before it decides what it's going to do. I think about that a lot. Right before it decides. He slept through the night last Tuesday for the first time in months. I know because I checked. I still check. I walk down the hall at 2 in the morning and I stand outside his door and I listen for him breathing. I will probably do that for the rest of my life. I want to say something, and I want to say it plainly because I've spent too long in my life saying things indirectly. If you have a child in your life, your child, your grandchild, a neighbor's kid, a student, a niece or nephew, and something feels wrong, trust that feeling, not the polite version of the feeling, not the version you've talked yourself into because you don't want to cause trouble or overstep or seem paranoid. The actual feeling. I explained away months of signals, and I will live with that, not in a way that swallows me. I've been told, and I believe, that self-destruction helps no one, least of all Felix. But I will live with it. Children tell you things in ways that aren't words. Felix told me things every time he looked at the door when we visited. Every time he hugged me a little too long when I left. Every time he asked, toward the end, when I was coming back. I didn't hear it. I do now. Last week, Felix asked me if we could get a dog. I said I'd think about it. He said, you always say that, and then you say yes. I said, I'm consistent. He said, Grandpa, you literally got a fish when I asked you to think about it. I told him the fish had been a stepping stone. He informed me that the fish had died. I told him that was a stepping stone too. He laughed. He's got this laugh that takes over his whole face, eyes squinting, head back. His grandmother laughed like that. I haven't told him that yet. I'm waiting for the right moment, the kind you can't plan. Just recognize when it comes. We're going to look at dogs this Saturday. I don't know what I found in that room will ever fully leave me. But I know what I found afterward, what I built from it, and I'm not willing to let the first thing take the second thing away. Felix asked me this morning what we were doing today. I said, whatever you want. He said, can we just stay home? I said, yes. We can do that. We sat on the porch in our coats the way we did that October morning, and the clouds moved the way they always do. And he didn't ask me what pushes the wind this time. He just watched. Some questions, I'm learning, don't need answers right away. Some things you just sit with until they start to make sense on their own. We're sitting with it. Both of us. I've thought a lot about the word fine, how many times I heard it and accepted it. Aaron said things were fine. Renata said Felix was fine. I told myself the distance between us was fine, that families go through seasons, that I didn't want to overstep. Fine is the word we reach for when we want to stop a conversation without lying outright. I used it too. I'm not exempt from this. What I know now, what Felix taught me without meaning to, is that the people who need us most are rarely the ones who say so directly. A 6-year-old boy doesn't have the language for something is wrong in this house. He has paint chips and questions about clouds and the way he holds on a little too long when you hug him goodbye. That's the language. I just wasn't fluent in it yet. There's a version of cause and effect that's easy to trace in hindsight. I ignored the signs, so time passed, so Felix suffered longer than he should have. That's true, and I carry it. But there's another chain I try to hold on to just as firmly. I got in the car that Sunday morning. I knocked on the door and didn't leave. I heard 31 ceiling slats described to me by a child who counted them to fall asleep, and I made sure he never had to count them again. Actions compound in both directions. The choices that hurt us accumulate the same way the choices that save us do. I think about what it means to raise someone, not just a child, but yourself alongside them. Felix is learning slowly that the world is not the storage room, that doors open, that people stay. I am learning at 61 that love is not passive. It does not wait to be invited. It shows up at 6:45 in the morning, and it stands in the hallway, and it does not leave without what it came for. Moral character is not a trait you have. It's a decision you make, repeatedly, in small moments, most of which nobody sees. It was a moral decision to drive over that Sunday. It was a moral decision to go up the stairs. It was a moral decision months later to say yes when Aaron asked if Felix could live with me, even knowing how much it would change my life, even knowing I was 61 with bad knees in a quiet house. You don't get to call yourself a good person based on your intentions. You get to call yourself one based on what you do when it's inconvenient. And resilience. I used to think that word belonged to the young, to Felix, who had to rebuild trust from a locked room floor, but I've had to rebuild something too. The idea I had of my family. The comfort of believing that the people I loved were safe when I wasn't looking. You grieve the version of the world that turned out not to be true, and then you get up and learn to navigate the one that is. Felix is looking at dogs this Saturday. He's decided he wants a big one. He said small dogs seem nervous. I told him that was a very perceptive observation. He told me I talk like a textbook sometimes. He's not wrong. I'm learning to talk like a grandfather instead. We've got time.